Joining me right now is Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. Secretary Ross, it's always a pleasure. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you again, Maria.
So the president is estimating that this initiative could save the U.S. $1 trillion over the next 10 years. How would it work? Take us behind the meeting and what was most important yesterday.
Well, the fact is that the government, not just the federal, but also state and local government, generally has not spent very much on upgrading their technology. A lot of archaic equipment is being used, a lot of equipment where you can barely get proper support anymore. And there are various estimates that government may be spending something like $90 billion a year on maintaining systems that fundamentally are obsoleted by modern standards.
Are these companies ready and willing to help in this effort? There were 18 CEOs there yesterday. What kind of a sense did you get from these companies of what they will actually do to achieve that goal?
Well, the real specifics of the plan haven't been worked out as yet, but they all acknowledge the need. They all acknowledge that if we thought about capital expenditure rather than maintenance, we'd be a lot better off. So there's a lot of investigation as to the extent to which we could simply reinvest in new equipment, funding that otherwise would have to go for maintenance. It's kind of a juggling act.
I could totally see that. And you think this would save $1 trillion over 10 years?
Well, it certainly can be a very, very big number. As I said, there's something like $90 billion a year or more that's spent on maintenance of the equipment and maintaining an obsolete thing. Think about your car. Once your car gets to be, 10 years old, you start putting an inordinate amount into its maintenance relative to what would be the maintenance on a new vehicle. So one of the peculiarities of government accounting is that a capital expenditure and an expense more or less are treated the same way from a budgetary point of view, whereas the capital expenditure has enduring value. It has a long-term asset value, whereas the maintenance, the out-of-pocket expense, it's just gone.
I see that the Homeland Security Secretary was there. Wilbur, let me ask you about security and what came up around that topic. You've got the leaders of some of these companies that can actually have a real hand in helping protect our data, cybersecurity, a huge issue. And then, of course, there's the extremism in terms of content online. What was said about those topics?
Well, Homeland Security and cybersecurity are inextricably linked together, and cybersecurity is a problem everywhere. You've seen some of the recent hacking incidents on a very, very big scale, some of which were for commercial purposes, others of which appear perhaps to have been for national security purposes. So I think we're going to find the defenders of security, cybersecurity, keep developing new firewalls, new ways to keep the bad people out, and yet there's a great deal of ingenuity on the part of the hackers to figure out new ways to intrude and new ways to be disruptive.
Yeah, they sure are. Let's talk trade, Secretary. I enjoyed that piece with you in the Journal the other day in terms of the conversation on trade. We're all trying to figure out when we'll see tax reform. It's so important for the economy, moving the needle on growth, and it's so important, of course, for the markets as well. Are you expecting that we will see some kind of a tax at the border? I mean, maybe it's not a border adjustment tax because we know that the president is not in favor of that, but maybe it's a reciprocal tax or some kind of other tax at the border in terms of trade with our friends across the world?
Well, the border adjustable tax was not proposed particularly as a trade agenda item.
Okay.
The border adjustable tax was proposed mainly to help balance the budget. As you know, to get to reconciliation when there are different bills passed by the House from the one passed by the Senate, you need to have a certain scoring by the Congressional Budget Office, namely over a 10-year horizon to break even. That means that you have to fill some holes, and the border adjustable tax idea was an idea that Chairman Brady, I believe, came up with in order to try to fill that hole.
Do you have to fill the hole, though? I mean, that's the point. I mean, do you need to see some kind of revenue raise, or can you do away with this whole idea of deficit neutral?
Well, the rules for reconciliation are fairly clear, and as I understand them, you need to be neutral at the 10-year time horizon. And the reason we need the reconciliation is that it's unlikely that the House and the Senate will pass exactly the same bills.
So if we don't see a border adjustment tax in the tax portion of this, in terms of trade, what you're overseeing, are you expecting any other kind of tax, like a reciprocal tax, something at the border?
Well, remember, the U.S. budget until well into the 20th century, main component had been tariffs. So tariffs are nothing new to the financing of the U.S. government, but we've long passed that with the advent of personal income tax and corporate tax. So now border adjustable or some such thing is simply one way to fill up a portion of a hole.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if it ends up there. I know